Yeah, so we're going to be in 1 Samuel. We're going to read the whole chapter. There's a lot of verses, so bear with me, but it's important. So we're in 1 Samuel chapter 1. We're going to do 1 to, I believe it's like 28. Yeah, 28. 1 to 28. So now there was a certain man from Ramathaim, Zophaim. I'm going to mess up some of these words, so forgive me. Of the mountains of Ephraim, and his name was Elkanah, the son of Jeroham, the son of Eliu, and the son of Tohu, the son of Zoeph, and an Ephraimite. And he had two wives. That's a problem right there, right? And he had two wives. The name of one was Hannah. So that's the first one. When they mention Hannah, it's because it's his first wife. So the name of one was Hannah, and the name of the other was Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. So that's the first problem. That's the pain right there. So in those times, when people were married, if you were like 10 years married and you didn't produce a child, the husband would be able to take on another wife to have children. Because to them, like, the women didn't have as much rights as the men. And for them, it was about the man's name that was more important. He wanted a legacy. It was important for him to have a legacy and for it to live on. So if she wasn't going to produce a child, he had to, in his mind, he needed a wife that was going to give him children. So that's pain right there. So Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. This man went up from his city yearly to worship and sacrifice to the Lord of hosts. This is who we were praying to before, the Lord of hosts in Shiloah. Also, the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, the priests of the Lord, were there. And whenever the time came, Elkanah had to make an offering. He would give portions to Peninnah, his wife, and to all her sons and daughters. You see that? So they get the portions first because she bore children.
That's right.
And he would give Hannah a double portion, for he loved Hannah. So he would give Hannah a double portion because he loved her. It's just that she didn't produce children for him. Although the Lord had closed her womb, I want you to see that. It says the Lord had closed her womb. It wasn't the devil. A lot of times we say, like, the devil's doing this or the devil's doing that. In this situation, it was the Lord that had her womb closed. And her rival also provoked her severely to make her miserable. That embodies the enemy. That's what the enemy does. He provokes us severely to make us miserable. Because the Lord had closed the womb, so she's taunting her. So it was year by year when she went up to the house of the Lord that she provoked her. Therefore she wept and did not eat. Then Elkanah, her husband, said to her, Hannah, why do you weep? Why do you not eat? And why is your heart grieved? So, that's probably, not a good question. That's probably not. I advise husbands don't ask questions like that when you know the answer. Am I not better than, he's being very insensitive here. Am I not better than 10 sons? That's pretty crazy, right? She's going through it because your current wife is taunting her, and she hasn't produced a son for you, and now you're saying, like, hey, ain't I better than 10 wives? If you was better than 10 wives, you would have never took another wife. Like, you're bugging. Think about it. Think about the pain that's probably going through her. So Hannah arose, and after they had finished eating and drinking in Shiloah, now Eli the priest was sitting on the seat by the doorpost of the tabernacle of the Lord, and she was in bitterness of soul. So her soul is crushed right now, and prayed to the Lord and wept in anguish. Then she made a vow and said, so she's making a vow, and she's saying, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your maidservant and remember me. When I first was going to do this message, I had it titled Lent, and we'll touch on it later. God, the Holy Spirit had me change it to remember. So she's saying, remember me and not forget your maidservant, But will you give your maidservant a male child? She's asking specifically for what she wants. As people of God, we have to learn to act specifically for what we want. We have to be direct with God. He knows what we want. We have to be specific on what we want. Then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life. And no razor, this is a Nazirite vow, no razor will come upon his head. So he's going to be consecrated and set apart for the work of the Lord. And it happened as she continued praying before the Lord that Eli watched her mouth. Now Hannah spoke in her heart. Only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. You know, a lot of times in the kingdom, they say you have to, the kingdom is word operated. And it's true. It's very true. But look at this. Her lips are moving, but nothing's coming out. But God knows her heart. Pay attention to that. Only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore, Eli thought she was drunk. That reminds you of Pentecost, right? When you're not familiar with the Spirit of God, the spirit of accusation comes. So Eli said to her, how long will you be drunk? Put your wine away. But Hannah answered and said, no, my Lord, I am a woman of a sorrowful spirit. I have not neither drinking wine nor intoxicating drink, but I have poured out my soul before the Lord. Do not consider your maidservant a wicked woman. For out of the abundance of my complaint and grief I have spoken until now. Then Eli answered and said, go in peace. And the God of Israel grant you the petition which you have asked him. And she said, let your maidservant find favor in your sight. So the woman went her way and ate, and her face was no longer sad. Pay attention to that. She went and wept and poured out her heart. She was in bitterness of soul. She went, she wept, she poured out her heart unto the Lord. She leaves, she eats something, her face is different. Every time we go before God, every time we pour our heart out to God, we come out different. Our face, our countenance, our face could be all messed up. We could show what's going on in our lives. We spend some time in the presence of the Lord. We leave differently.
That's right. Come on.
So she was no longer sad. Verse 19. Then they arose early in the morning and worshiped before the Lord and returned and came to their house in Ramah. That's very, very important. Right there, she went and she worshiped the very next morning with the same people that were tormenting her. Her husband saying stupid stuff. This lady taunting her. After she goes and she spends time in the presence of God, she's able to even go worship with these people that she probably didn't want to even be in the same room with. That's what God does when we spend time in his presence. He could remove the pain. So you see here it says, and Eli knew Hannah, his wife. Elkanah, sorry, not Eli. Eli's the priest, God forgive me. And Elkanah knew his wife. That means he made love to her. And the Lord remembered her. You see that? That's that word, remember again. The Lord remembered her. So it came to pass in the process of time that Hannah conceived and bore a son. She got what she asked for. She asked specifically for a son, and she got what she asked for. And called his name Samuel, saying, because I have asked for him and the Lord, because I have asked from the Lord. His name means God has heard. So she's saying that she named him that because she asked God and he heard. He answered her prayer. Now the man, Elkanah and his house, all went up to offer to the Lord their yearly sacrifice and vow. But Hannah did not go up, for she said to her husband, not until this child is weaned, then I will take him, that he may appear before the Lord and remain there forever. So Elkanah, her husband, said to her, do what seems best for you. Wait until you have weaned him. Only let the Lord establish his word, and he will. Then the woman stayed and nursed her son until she had weaned him. Now when she weaned him, she took him up with her 3 bulls, with 1 ephah of flour and a skin of wine, and brought him to the house of the Lord in Shiloh. And the child was young. Then they slaughtered a bull, and they brought the child to Eli. And she said, "Oh, my Lord, as your soul lives, my Lord, I am the woman who stood by you here praying to the Lord. For this child I prayed, and the Lord granted me my petition, which I asked. Therefore, I also have lent him to the Lord." That's why I was going to name it Lent, but I changed it. "Therefore, I have lent him to the Lord. As long as he lives, he shall be lent to the Lord." So they worshiped the Lord there. All right. So sorry for the pain I might have caused there reading that whole thing, but we're going to get into the breakdown. So now in verse 2. Verse 2 identifies the problem, pain. Right away, she has pain. Elkanah had 2 wives, but only one gave him children. right? So that's pain. She loved him. Think about it. 10 years. 10 years they're married. And nothing. This disappointment on top of disappointment on top of disappointment. So now she's already going through it. And then he goes and does what's right for him by the law to go on and take another wife. Think about what that must have done to her. More pain. But she sits there and she gets through it. No, Hannah was named first because it was his wife. So the barrenness in that day, in those times when a woman was barren and a woman couldn't conceive or had children, they always looked at it as they were afflicted of God, like they were cursed, like something bad happened. So now there's a reproach that's on her. She has a reproach because she never bore him children. She's going through it because she loves them, and she couldn't bear him children when she wanted to. And she sees him now with another woman that's bearing children. So that's pain on top of pain on top of pain. Every year they go up to sacrifice to the Lord. Every year they go up, and she has to go up with him, with this other family. And supposed to be happy, supposed to sacrifice, and supposed to do that. And she does that year after year. Not only that, this woman's not even nice to her. This woman torments her. This woman teases her. This woman picks on her and taunts her. That's what the enemy does. She's taunting her with what she wants most.
That's right.
Verse 6, her adversary provoked her to make her miserable. This is the goal of the enemy. He wants to make the people of God miserable. He wants to afflict us with pain and trouble. He wants to provoke us to anger. The devil wants us so badly irritated that we're living in misery. That's his goal. He knows that we're winning, so he tries to bring everything against us so that we believe that we're not winning. He knows he's defeated, so he wants us to feel what he feels. He's miserable. He wants us miserable. The thing is, we gotta be aware that we can't allow him permission to make us miserable because we're in control of what goes on inside of us. Not to say that it's not going to hurt, not to say that it's not painful, but we have to learn as the people of God to bring that pain to the Lord and exchange it. He wants to exchange that pain for something else.
That's right. You got to trust.
So verse 7 reveals that every year as they went up to the house of the Lord, Peninnah took the opportunity to provoke her. I said that, but this time it was different. Hannah wept and did not eat. Hannah is at a breaking point. Hannah is either going to break down or break through. So you see, like, a breaking point is where you come to this point. We all know what a breaking point. There's so much built up. But there's two kinds of people. There's the person that just totally loses it and has a meltdown and breaks down and completely gives up. And then there's the pressures of the world that gets to the point where you have so much built up internally that you're like fed up and you're tired and you're going to do something about it. And she finally gets to the point where she's angry. She has like a righteous anger in her, and she's going before God. And she's going before God with tears. She's going before God with her pain. And she's going before God with a promise, with a vow. She's going to break through. She's not going to break down. Verse 8. Verse 8 reveals the immaturity and lack of empathy. He doesn't feel sympathy for what his wife has went through. He's not sensitive. Elkanah, the husband. Men, when we ask our wives a question, we should let them answer. If we could pull anything from this, guys who are married, when we ask something, even if we think we know the answer, let them answer us. If not, don't ask the question. Elkanah asked a question he already knew the answer to. He should have been offering comfort instead of stupidity. Sometimes we do dumb things. God forgive us. Verse 10, help us, Lord. Hannah went to the temple of the Lord, and she was in bitterness of soul, meaning her soul was poisoned by her circumstances. Bitterness means angry, chaffed, dissatisfied, and poisoned. You know what chaffed is? Like, I know guys probably know this. Like, if you wear skinny jeans and you try to go for a walk in the summertime, you're going to know what chaffed is. It's when something rubs you the wrong way to the point of irritation. You might need some baby powder. It's bad. So she's at the point of irritation from this woman. This woman is irritating her to the point. But you know what's interesting about that woman? Peninnah, her name, if you look up the root to her name means pearl. She's not a pearl, but her name means pearl and her name means ruby. And you know how pearls and precious stones are formed like that? Through irritation. So this woman, this woman is an instrument of the devil, but God's going to use her as an instrument to produce a gem in Hannah's life.
Come on, that's right.
It's very interesting. Names are I'm very fascinated when I read the scripture with the names of people and numbers and things of that, because there's so much meaning and there's so much depth to it.
That's right.
We can either cry about our situation or we can learn to bring our tears to the Lord. There's a difference. Verse 11, this is the breakthrough verse. Hannah approaches God with a vow because she begins using his warring name because she is depressed and she realizes she's in a battle she can't win alone. That's the breaking point. Hannah says, remember me, which translates to mark as to be recognized. She's going to God right now, and she's coming into his presence, and she's coming to him with an attitude. She's pouring out her heart, and she's coming to him because she knows that he's the only one that could do something about her situation. And in that moment, her heart is so right before him that God is looking at her and God's marking her. Just like when you read the word and something stands out to you and you highlight it, so it's easy to find. God is marking her. God is remembering her vow. She made a vow. Hannah asked specifically for what she wanted. She wanted a man-child. But this is the breaking point. Hannah is willing to give back to God the very thing she wants most. And that's one of the things I wanted to hit on today. Are we willing to give God the very thing that we want most? There's things that we want. There's things that we desire. There's things that we've been believing God for. But that very thing that we're believing God for, are we willing to give it back to him? There's a difference. Are we willing to give God back the very thing that we want? My wife and I, we were believing for a child for so long. We were believing for a child for so long. Disappointment on disappointment on disappointment. And you know what? You got it. There's a very thin line you don't want to cross. And it's that thing you could want so bad it could become an idol in your life. That thing you could want so bad you could focus on that more than God. So some of the best things that we can do is let it go and give it to God. Everything he gives us, God, we're his kids. Everything he gives us is ours. When we give it back to him, we're just letting him know that thing we recognize is from you, but we're giving it back to you because everything that we have is from you. You're our source. When our hearts are prepared to let God have what we want most, we position ourselves to receive the very thing that we've been praying for. When we're brought into understanding that everything we have is from him, giving God what's his becomes easy and viewed as the right thing to do. It doesn't even become a question after a while. It's just like we're just programmed like this is how it's supposed to be. It's his. My wife is his. My son is his. My daughter is his. He's given them to me, but it's my responsibility to steward those things that he gives me well, and I'm giving it back to him because I know I can't even take care of them without him. They're yours first. So if you want them for the work of the ministry, they're yours. Do what you want with them. My life is yours. Do what you want with it. When we give God what's his, it frees us from things having us. When we're willing to give God our heart's desires, when we're unwilling, to give God our heart's desires, our desires become idolatry. Even when our heart's desires are good, it becomes bad when God is removed from the equation.
That's right.
Hannah's circumstances, verses 12 through 16. I'm going to try to get through this. I know we had a long day here. But Hannah's circumstances finally broke and got her to a place of intercession when words couldn't be formed to express the brokenness of her heart. Eli saw her and he thought that she was drunk because he was unfamiliar with what was going on. Because that man, if you continue reading the scriptures, you see that he wasn't good. He wasn't a good priest. His children were no good. He was accusing her of what his children were doing. He couldn't recognize the Spirit of God moving on her heart. He couldn't recognize that she got to a place of deep intercession where she was crying out, not begging God, but coming, invoking heaven, coming before him, saying, God, I need you to move, just like we were talking before, trying to touch heaven. I need you to move on my behalf this son, I want this son so badly, but this son that I want so badly, I'm willing to give back to you. You can have him. Just give me this son, and I'll give him back.
Come on.
That's intercession. She stood in the gap. Eli reminds me of the Jews on the day of Pentecost when they thought the people of God were drunk because they were unfamiliar with how the Spirit of God would touch his people, so they accused them of being drunk. Hannah poured out her complaints and grief to God, not people. As people of God, we have to remember that it's so easy to complain about what we're going through. I've been there, I've done it, I'm guilty. It's so easy to complain, but when you do it, it becomes a habit. And you might not do it constantly, but if you just give a little room, you find yourself complaining more. You'll find yourself doing more things that like just putting out your complaints to people and dumping on people. But really, God wants you to bring that to him, because people can't do nothing for you. God can exchange that for something else. God can turn ashes to beauty. God can take something that's broken and fix it. We complain to people. All they want to do is all they're going to do is listen to us and talk about us later. Like, yo, the Joe's in a bad place, but that guy's like, he needs some help, bro. So at least God got to do something about your brokenness. Yeah, we have to learn to take our pain to the one who could do something about it. Verses 17 through 19. Eli sends her off in peace. May the God of Israel grant you your petition, grant you your request. Hannah's sad face changes after spending time in the presence of the Lord. After Hannah poured out her heart to the Lord, she was able to worship before the Lord with the very people that grieved her. I touched on that before, because she left her pain at the altar. Because she left her pain at the altar, she was able to worship with the people that were grieving her. It's a hard thing to do. You ever been around somebody that rubs you the wrong way, someone that does stuff intentionally to hurt you, and you're trying to be and you just being in the same room, your face will change. No matter how much of the Holy Ghost you got, if you don't deal with that before the Lord and you don't give that to him, you're not going to act right. People are going to see it. And you're going to feel it. You're going to act like a weirdo because you didn't bring it to God. I know, because I do it. I've been there. God's helping me get through that, but I've been there. This week, one of my good friends was doing some really crazy stuff to me, and I was so upset with him. I was really annoyed with him, and it was so stupid if I tell you how it started. And I really, later on, I went home at night. I couldn't even work on the word because I let that rob me. So I had to take it to the Lord, because I wasn't going to work on this message with that attitude. I had to take it to the Lord, dump it out, and get free. I had to go the next day when I went to work, give him a hug, tell him I love him, and get that out, because I'm the one that has to do it, because I'm the Christian. So as Christians, we got to go first. So I went first. I said, I'm sorry, listen, set some boundaries. We're not going to do that again. And now I can move forward. Now at night, I could go home with a smile on my face and work on the word that I'm supposed to preach. But before that, I couldn't do it. It's because the enemy will use the people closest to you, the people around you, to push your buttons. But what's going to come out? When you get squeezed, what's going to come out? When you get poked, what's going to come out? Verses, where am I? 7. So Eli sent her off in peace. So Hannah's face changed. I said that. So after Hannah poured out her heart to the Lord, she was able to worship. I said that too. Forgive me. Elkanah knew his wife. There you go. And the Lord remembered her. There's the word remember. So now she's being intimate with her husband. They're making love. But every time they made love prior to that intercession, God didn't remember her. Now he remembers her. Doesn't remember the husband. When I read this, you know what, guys? This I'm going to speak to the husbands real quick. I believe Hannah and Elkanah could have never, she never needed another wife. He never needed a wife number 2. What God still used that situation, but I don't believe that was his plan. I think that where he failed was he didn't go. He should have been with his wife. They should have been calling on God together. They should have been calling on God together. They should have been interceding together. They should have been touching heaven together to get God to move on their lives, instead of taking what was right by the law, by man, to go get something else. So you know what that happens? When you try to do something in your flesh, you know what that produces? Ishmael. It doesn't produce an Isaac. It doesn't produce an Isaac. So now what's happening? She's producing an Isaac. They went before God with the right. She went before God. Her husband should have been there. He still wasn't there, but God's still going to touch them coming together and making love, and he's still going to give the promise because God's faithful. But if men, I'm speaking to us, I'm speaking to myself, we have to learn. Our wives, yes, they're going to intercede for us on our behalf when we're not there, but we have to learn how to touch heaven together. We have to learn how to touch heaven together to move forward. Or if not, we're going to produce Ishmaels in our life trying to do things on our own strength. So God remembered her. Hannah names her son. That was unusual. The women didn't name their children. Hannah's naming her son because she interceded and God remembered her. So she has the right to name her son. He could have taken that son up. He could have said, no, you don't give it. But she made a vow and he recognizes that this is from God. So he's given her the freedom to name her son and to wean him and to take him up when she felt it was right. So he names the son, which means God has heard because God answered her cry. Hannah chose to not go up to sacrifice to the Lord until Samuel was weaned. Imagine how special the time Hannah had with Samuel until he was weaned. This process was about 3 to 5 years, but Hebrew mothers were more likely to do 3 years. Those 3 years probably brought her so much joy. Those 3 years was worth everything for her. I'm a father. I know how much I love my son, my daughter, but I see how special that bond is when a woman pushes out that baby and raises that baby and feeds that baby is special. So I know that time was very special to her. And when Samuel was weaned, Hannah did what was right. She said she did what she said she was going to do. She went to fulfill her vow, knowing how hard that must have been. Now you got to do what you said you're going to do. Now you got to give this baby to the Lord. That's difficult. But it's commitment over feelings for her. She made a vow, she made a promise, she's keeping her word. And that's powerful. Verses 27 through 28, for this child I prayed, translates to intercede and to entreat. That's what we were speaking about before. If we're going to represent God well, we must learn how to stand in the gap when nobody is looking. We as people of God have to learn to ask specifically from God what we want. I laugh because Pastor teaches, he says this story, and I do it with my son. I think it was his granddad that used to tell him, like, because he would come to him like, hey, like trying to get something out of him. And he would always say, like, if you want something, say what you want. Like, tell me what you want. Like, pretty much, like, don't beat around the bush. If you want something, ask for it. And that's the heart right here. Like, you want something from God, he's a father, you just got to ask for him. He knows what we want. Don't beat around the bush. You got to ask, and you got to ask in faith. And you got to believe. And the very thing that you ask for, you have to be willing for that thing that you're asking for to not want more than you want him. He has to be first. It has to be an alignment, and it has to be order to the things that we're asking for.
Come on. That's right. Good word.
All right, so when we lend to the Lord what he has given us, I use the word twine or join self or cleave to what he has given us. There's an example in Proverbs 19:17 where it says, like, if you give to the poor, you lend to the Lord. But that word lend, it means to twine. So every time God gives us something, when we give it back to him, we involve ourselves in what he's given us. It's like when he gives us finances. That finances, when we give it to the kingdom, that what he gives us is from him, but we come connected to that when we give it back, when we let go. There's power to that. Notice in verse 28, it says, they worshiped the Lord there. The King James Version says that he worshiped the Lord there. Either way, Hannah showed Samuel, I don't know if you picked this up when you read the story, showed Samuel how to worship the Lord home privately before he did so publicly. If he was like 3 or 4 years old, when he went up at 3 or 4 years old, he knew how to worship the Lord. And I'm just making a guess. I don't think Daddy taught him how to do that. I think that was Mom. Should have been Dad, but I think it was Mom. In 1 Samuel chapter 2, verses 21, shows Hannah conceived 3 sons. This is later on. Hannah conceived 3 sons. and 2 daughters. 3 speaks to resurrection. That's God resurrecting what was dead in her. Three sons and 2 daughters. 2 speaks to the blessing and building. God's building and adding to her. Together, it's 5, which is the grace of God behind, giving God back what she desired most. There was power there. There was grace there. There was order and alignment there. Samuel was God's testimony that marked Hannah so that she could remember what God did for her. By this, she could believe he would do it again. So this is what I wanted to share. Last week, I believe in, like when I speak, I like to share testimonies because I like to read the Word of God. I love the Word of God. It's a privilege to preach the Word of God. But I believe in testimonies because testimonies is the evidence that our God is alive. And our God is here. And our God is with us. And our God is moving. And our God is doing things. So foolishly, I like how God corrects me sometimes because we say foolish things out of sincerity of heart, out of a good place. But lately I was like, in worship, I'm telling God, like, God, I need new testimonies. I need new testimonies. I need you to do something new in my life because I want to brag about you and I want to tell everyone all the good things you're doing. With almost like the attitude, I'm tired about like the old stuff that you did. I want something new. And I was like, it was sincere, but it was stupid. And God tells me, I want you to remember. And I didn't know that it was going to come in connection with this message. He goes, I want you to remember. He goes, remember when David went to fight Goliath, what did he do? He went with the testimony that God went before him with the lion and the bear. And he knew that God gave him that victory. So he faced Goliath, remembering what God did for him in the past. God anointed him with Samuel, right? Think about the promises of God. This man that Hannah interceded for, anointed the 2 kings of Israel, and the one David who Jesus came from, his line, his blood. It's powerful what this woman did, what she was willing, what we're willing to give up and sacrifice. God can do way more than we could ever imagine. And her name's going to be remembered in heaven. Her name's going to be remembered in heaven. So God told me, don't forget, because you're not going to go get your next testimony without your old testimony. You're not going into the new without the old. And then he even took it further. He said after that, what did David do? He said, who is this uncircumcised Philistine over here saying like this non-covenant man? Who is this guy mocking the people of God? He told him, he prophesied to him, I'm going to take that sword of yours and I'm going to cut your head off. And what did he do? He took his sword, he cut his head off. And then like a crazy man, he walks around with his head all over town. He walks in front of the king and he's like, yo, where's your daughter at? Because she promised the daughter. He's like, yo, what's in it for me? Where's your daughter? Like he went there like a crazy person. So now this guy is jealous. The king is jealous of him. Why? Because he sees that when they go into town, they're singing like Saul slayed 1,000 men, but David slayed 10,000 men. And he's like, now his ego's popped. He recognizes the hand of God on this man's life. He doesn't know that Samuel anointed him privately, but he obviously sees the hand of God. He knows that his reign is over, right? But David is a man after God's heart. He wouldn't kill. There's just some things in the kingdom you have to receive that you can't take by force. And he knew that he was going to receive the kingdom. He wasn't going to take it by force. So he left it up to God to when he was going to be able to inherit that kingdom. So now Saul is chasing this dude. Saul wants to kill this man, and he's on the run. He goes to the house of the Lord. And he's in the house of the Lord, and he's there, and he's hungry, and he's got no weapons. He's a mighty warrior, but he's got no sword. And he's there. He's like, I need some food. He's like, the priest is like, well, we got some consecrated bread. We just put it out today. If you guys didn't touch no women, you can have some. And he goes and he's like, yeah, we're good. So they eat. And then he says, but the only sword I have is the sword of Goliath. So what's happening there? God is telling him like, hey, listen, remember what I did for you. You're not going into the next one without taking your old testimony with you, because your old testimony is what's going to empower you to have faith enough to go face that next giant.
Whoa, come on.
So what God was telling me, and then God brought it into perspective. He said, remember this. And he brought something that I never realized in my own life. I was in a place where like I received a prophetic word about God given me that I was going to own multiple businesses, and they were going to be barbershops, but they were going to be Holy Ghost barbershops where people were going to come in off the streets and leave transformed. At the time, I had maybe like $200 and some. My wife always had more money than me. So like it's all money, but like I was always like, paycheck to paycheck. So this lady prophesies this thing to me, and I'm like, I believe it. I start going like a crazy person, making appointments at different places to rent with $200 in my bank account. Because I believe the word of God. I would go there, and I just wanted to go through the process, and I would go through the process, and I would go through the process. And, but I had no money. One day my father tells me, he's like, my father never does anything like this. Like we were just starting to like get like cool. And he's like, how much does it take to open a barbershop? And at the time I was just like, I had $200, so 5,000 sounded like a lot. Like it sounded like a lot like that. Yeah, 5,000, which is not the case. It's way more than that. But I just said $5,000. And he said, all right, I'm going to send you $5,000. I'd rather give you an inheritance while I'm alive than you wait for it to when I'm dead. And I said, great. I was crying. I was calling pastor. I was like all super happy. And and that was great. It was beautiful. But you know what happened? I found a place that was right down the street. I put money down on it. And, I had some beef with the landlord. I believe it was the presence of God on me. And I believe there was the devil in him that wasn't letting it happen. And it didn't happen. And I thank God it didn't happen. But at the time, I was so devastated and so like hurt that it didn't happen. Like I almost gave up on the word that I received. And I'm just going to work, working for somebody else. And at the time, I'm like really like almost sad and depressed in a weird way. And during the process, I was going through it financially, and I wouldn't tell her that I was going through it financially because I'm I gotta have things locked down. So like if I would have asked her for help, she would have helped me. But the thing is, I had pride, which isn't good. But I just didn't want to let her know that I was messed, that I couldn't afford. Like, how am I going to get a barbershop? I can't even support my family being a barber. So it didn't make sense. And I started wasting the money my father gave me just to pay rent and to pay the bills and to do things. And I forgot about that. And God, this was last week in service, God is reminding me of all of this back to back. And he said, do you remember what happened? And my brother-in-law was doing a job. My brother-in-law, like God bless him, is a really good man. But he was doing a job for someone. He has a painting business. He was painting this guy's house, and this guy was a retiring barber. And this guy was a Christian. And this guy he was retiring. He told, my brother-in-law's a barber. He said, oh yeah, he's a barber? He said, hey, check it out. If he wants, tell him I'm in Montclair. Gave him the address. He goes, tell him to come up. He could have everything I have for free. Whoa. Everything I have, he could have for free. He just got to move it out. Wow. You know what God told me? He says, who took care of you? It wasn't your dad's $5,000 because you wasted it. It was me. I provided for you. I showed up for you. We have to remember that God's our source. God's our source. We have to really, it has to get settled in our spirit. We have to really, if we're going to trust God with our tomorrow, it has to get settled in our spirit that he's our source and that he could do the things that man will say that we can't do. He'll make it happen. We can't look right or to the left for somebody else. I can't look to my dad. He was a good man and I love him, but his $5,000 wasn't enough. Even with the $5,000, if I didn't squander it, it wasn't enough for what I needed. God provided everything that I needed. It may not have looked brand new, but those chairs, one of those chairs was worth more than the money my father gave me because they were antique vintage Belmonts. And he gave me 4 of those. So I started out with everything from that, and then from there we grew. Right. And you want to know something else that was funny? He reminded me of something else, and I'll stop after this, but I want to bring testimonies into this. When I got that place, the first 2 months I couldn't pay rent. But this time I had to go to my wife. I had to suck up the pride. I said, babe, I can't afford rent. I had no barbers with me. No one, now I just had more debt. And she, like the first 2 months of my life, of the Way Barbershop, she was backing me with the money because she believed in me. And you know what? That furniture that guy who was a Christian gave me, inside that furniture, had a book. It was so old, very old. I was telling DK and Tina the story. So old. The pages like would rip if you went through it. And it was a book from David Wilkerson, man of God who started Times Square Church. And in there it was like 800 different promises of God. So I get into the point where I'm like, yo, no one's in this place. I'm by myself in the barbershop. And I get to the point where I got to a breaking point. And I said, God, I can't do this on my own. I found this book. This book had some promises inside, and there was something that said if you were going through like a financial hardship, there were some promises in there. And I just opened up that book that was in the same furniture that God gave me. And I just opened it up and I cried out with tears. I can't do it in my own strength. I need your help. Help me. I need your help. If you said you gave me this place, if you said that this is what you want from me, you have to do it because I can't do it. So help me. And you know what happened? I'm not saying this happened because of my prayers. The very next day, they shut down 50 barbershops in Hudson County. 50 barbershops. Out of the 50 barbershops that they shut down because people were illegally working and things like that with no licenses, I had 2 guys come to me looking for a job. One had a license, the other one didn't, but the other one was willing to go to school. The very next day, out of the furniture that God gave me, there was promises that I cried out with sincerity of heart, realizing that I can't do it without him. And what God was showing me when he was speaking to me last week right there as I was worshiping him, he says, you're asking for new testimonies, but you need to remember the old. You're not going to get the new unless you go back and remember what I did for you. You have to remember what God has did for you before if you're going to step before what's new. You can't step before what's new in your own strength, because when you remember what he did for you before, then you recognize that he's the source and it's not you. And we have to remind ourselves, because sometimes we can start to feel ourselves and think that it's us when it's not. It's him. So my word for you today is everything that we want, everything that's on our heart, everything that is good, everything that is pure, involve God in it. Give it to him. Touch heaven together. If you're married, touch heaven together. Believe with him to do it together. Don't settle. Don't settle. And don't do things on your own, because you're going to produce an Ishmael.
Come on, that's right.
We want Isaacs. We want promises. God promised us. We're his.
Come on.
That's my word for you today. If you could get anything from that, that's what I want to, that's what I hope like gets settled in your heart. When David went, he went with what God did for him before. And God had to remind him with that sword of Goliath, like, hey, I'm going to do it again. And there was other battles that he fought after that. But those things stood out to me because the Bible said that there was none like it. There was no sword like that sword. And it wasn't because he was a champion Philistine that killed a lot of people. It wasn't that. It was because that sword, he defeated the enemies of God that rose up before all of Israel, and everyone was scared to death. And he had enough courage because he knew who would go before him and fight his battles. And he cut that guy's head off with that same sword, and that same sword was the reason why people cheered his name, and which would got him in trouble later. So he's like, hey, listen, that same sword is going to get you out of it again, because that sword doesn't represent Goliath. That sword represents me and what I did for you.
That's right. Come on.
So that's what I want to leave. If I hope that you guys get anything from anything today that I said, I hope that that's helpful. So truths to take home.
Amen. Woo!
Learn to pour out our pain before the Lord, or we will be full of bitterness. Either we're going to have a breakdown or a breakthrough. 2, spouses must learn to approach the Lord together or live with Ishmaels instead of Isaacs.
That's right.
Intimacy with God should mark us with the purposes of God. Remember to ask specifically of God for what we want. We should leave prayer with a different face and attitude. Every time we come before God in prayer, when we pour out, we should leave better than the way we came in. Remember, if we can't give God what we want most becomes our God. Remember, we can't have the next thing without remembering what God did in the last thing. So that's the closing. So I hope it was helpful. I know it was a little rough at first with the reading, but so I hope you guys were blessed. Yeah, come on, for sure, 100%.
I just want to say one thing. That testimony is so strong that if you just get a little bit of it, you will definitely move forward. I got a testimony almost exactly like that one. I mean, we all got testimonies. But I'm just saying, I just felt I had to share this for a second. And another thing I'm going to say to you as young couples, me and my wife, if we did anything, we came together and we prayed all the time. All the time. So I'm just want to put that out. That's so strong, you have no idea. Because when you get together with you, and we were young, like you guys are young, we were young when we met. She was 19, going on 20. I was 24, going on 25. But when we got saved and we started doing that, you can't get upset with the person you're praying with. So it was almost like God, I mean, God was like just there. He was just developing our everything. So I just want to put that out. I don't know why I'm saying it.
It's good, man.
Because I felt the same, but that was powerful.
It's good, man. Praise God. So let's pray. So Father, we thank you in Jesus' name for what you're doing in this place, God. We thank you for the marriages of this house, God. We thank you that through intimacy, we can empty ourselves out of any bitterness, anything, any disappointment, any anger, anything that is in us that doesn't belong, God. We thank you that we can pour it out and you take that, God, and that when we leave your presence, God, that we leave different. We thank you that you hear us, God. We thank you for the alignment that's in proper order when we come before you, God, that you give us what we ask as long as it is in alignment and in its proper order. So, God, we pray for new testimonies. We pray for the people of God in this place, God. We pray that you move in their families. We pray that you move among their families, God. I pray that you move in this place corporately, God. I thank you for what you're doing in this house. I thank you for the people that you have brought. I thank you that you brought us laborers. And then today when we were praying, one of the things I wanted to say, God, we're going to thank you ahead of time for the new building that you're going to give us. God, you're going to give us a new building, and it's going to be supernatural. And we speak it in faith, God.
Yes. Thank you, Lord.
And we thank you ahead of time for that new building that you're giving us, God. And we just bless our pastors, and we just pray for travel mercies as they come home, God. And we just thank you for this place, God. It's special. And we're excited to be here. Bless this outreach as we go out. And we just pray that your spirit be upon us and that your spirit goes with us. And we just pray for divine encounters as we leave, that these bags that we have go to the right people and we have a right word from heaven to minister to them as we go. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.